Welcome back to the Money and Wealth Show. I'm Sterling Fox. Our special guest this week is financial analyst, former broker, Victor Adair. Victor, you spend a lot of time paying attention to currencies in on the trading half of your semi-retirement life these days. You spend a lot of time paying attention to world currencies, moving in and out as the circumstances present themselves. What's strong and what's not these days? And I know it fluctuates day to day, but sort of summer into fall 2010, what's looking good for the final quarter of this year?
Well, I have my trading accounts where I'm going to call them short-term positions, speculative positions in the market. And I'll form an opinion about what I think should be happening or what may start to happen in the market. And I'll form that opinion usually, let's say in a large part based on kind of where I think the players in the market are. And of course that's hard to define, so it's say more of an art than a science. But I'll have this sense, for instance, that maybe something is getting overdone. And something is generally fear or greed. So say recently, well, here's a good example. Recently we saw the price of gold rise, but expressed in terms of euros, it skyrocketed, okay? Went up in terms of most of the currencies of the world, but really flew in terms of euros. Well, why was that? Well, because the trade, the spread to be short of euros and long of gold was very emotionally supercharged because people were afraid, there was fear driving the market about the euro. The euro, which a few months earlier, or certainly a year or two earlier, had been a viable alternative as a reserve currency to the US dollar on the world stage,
absolutely,
suddenly looks like maybe it's going to not exist anymore.
And the whole Greece thing got us started on that, didn't it?
Well, that was part of it. Believe me, the decline actually started in about December of what year? 9, okay? When you retired, you forget. But the decline accelerated in the euro. And it was really expressed in terms of the euro really falling against the price of gold. So now here's me seeing this go on. And for part of the time, I had the trade on. I was happy to go with the trade. That it seems to me, I always get out too early, leave money on the table, and when you're Scottish, you hate doing that sort of thing. But then I'm beginning to think the trade's gone too far, and it's going to reverse. Now, it's also been my experience of trading currencies for the better part of 40 years that the trends in the currencies go way further than I can imagine. My imagination's too small. So I need to wait for a confirmation in the market that my opinion, my idea, is finally, the time's right. Okay.
There's some resonance there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I approach trading, and I think it's particularly appropriate for trading currencies with that kind of view because you can't value currencies. Really, what's a Canadian dollar worth in terms of US dollars? What's a Canadian dollar worth in terms of Japanese yen? Even tougher question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could say, well, it's what the market says it is right now, but the market trades, changes in a few minutes. So relative currency values, and we trade zillions a day around the world, are largely driven by emotions, not by guys with green eye shades and calculators working things out. It's a very emotional market.
Is that why people opt for gold instead of playing the paper currency game? Because gold is more constant. It isn't manufactured in a printing press in Washington or London or Tokyo, that sort of thing. There's more historical security attached.
Well, I've been around the gold market since the early 1970s when I used to sell gold coins and little gold bars. And gold is real money. Okay, I understand that story, particularly when you look at fiat currencies and say they could just print. I mean, I have a $10 trillion note from the Bank of Zimbabwe in my currency collection. Okay, I understand that currency isn't worth the paper it's printed on argument when people get bullish on gold. So yeah, I understand that. But that's one of the factors that comes into play when I'm trading gold or trading currencies.
Okay. Is silver a factor in your trading spectrum at all?
I look at all kinds of things. I'll look at what's going on in silver. Probably with silver, I'm going to look more at the ratio that silver trades relative to gold than I'm going to look at the price of silver. My good friend Bob Hoy turned me onto that a number of years ago, and I pay attention to it. When the price of gold is rising relative to silver, that's usually a time of worry. When the price of silver is rising relative to gold, that's usually a time of exuberance.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just, well, it doesn't always work. Here's the thing. When you're trading, you think you see something that's a leading indicator. And just, you give it a few times, you say, God, this thing really works. And that's just about the time it stops working. But relationships are also key to how I trade. If I'm going to, Jimmy Rogers would say, for instance, how could you possibly trade wheat in Chicago if you don't know what the price of iron ore is in China?
Okay, okay. I think we'll just let that one stay on the table. We've only got a minute left here, and I wanted to ask you a little bit, very quickly, about the recent announcement from the Bank of Canada in which they increased interest rates a tiny percentage, 0.25, and at the same time projected reduced or slowed growth. So they seem to be at odds with themselves. What did you make of it?
Well, I remember just leading into that. I mean, the market expected they were going to raise rates.
Absolutely.
And probably talked the way they talked after that. And I thought if the Canadian dollar rallies at all on that bit of news, I'm probably going to I sold calls. I used it as an opportunity to say, switch some more money into U.S. The reason for that is, and also the reason I think they kind of talked it down, is they are worried that what is happening outside of Canada is going to have a more powerful impact on Canada than what is happening inside of Canada. So inside of Canada, they needed to raise rates. What's going on outside of Canada is why they were cautious about the future.
And wisely so. Well, I have to get you back in a few months and see how your predictions and what has happened outside of Canada, because my gosh, it's certainly an ever-changing scenario out there. Victor, thanks so much. It's really good to have you back on the program, and we must do this again.
We must do this again. It'd be good to be back.
Indeed. We'll be right back.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Ray. I'm the chairman and CEO of Molycorp Gold Corp. As the name states, we do have a deposit we're developing in British Columbia, which is a pure molybdenum deposit. But our focus these days is on magnesium in Nevada. Through serendipity, we discovered a large deposit of magnesium running about 10% with a high purity and consists of about 256 million tonnes at this time, 52 billion pounds. Our main emphasis is to move this project forward by beginning a drill program later this year in which we can increase the integrity of the resources into the indicated and inferred, as well as increase the resource itself. For further information, please visit our website at molycorp.com or phone us at 604-531-9639.
Tax Tips with David Ingram.
You got a rental house you haven't reported for the last 10 years? Got a rental suite in your house that you haven't reported? Maybe you live upstairs and rent out the downstairs, you live downstairs and rent up the upstairs. Doesn't matter, you got to report the income. If you don't report the income, the expenses, the penalties, the taxes can be absolutely demoralizing. They can tax you 25% and not bother giving you any deductions. So if you've got an illegal suite or a legal suite or a rental house and you haven't been reporting it, make sure you do, because all you got to do is offend you're a tenant. Tenant sends in a letter to Revenue Canada. Revenue Canada sends you a letter and says, we understand that you've been renting your house out for the last 6 years and haven't been reporting it, and you're in deep, 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 deep doo-doo. That's a tax tip from David Ingram. Report your house.
And that's our program for this week. Our thanks to David Ingram and to our special guest, Victor Adair.